John McMullen, of course, covers the Eagles and the NFL for 97.3 ESPN.com. He's at JF McMullen on Twitter. And he joins us now with a look at Week 14 for Eagles and Rams and everything else in the NFL, including, John, I'd like for you to explain how this Browns situation all went down, where they fired their GM and hired a guy in the same day.
Yeah, well, it was pretty evident that they knew they were going to fire Sashi Brown, and the timing was the issue. I think the New York Giants firing Jerry Reese kind of sped things up, because all of a sudden the Giants were in early for a guy like John Dorsey, and that had to sort of increase the sense of urgency. So I think that's why the timing happened the way it was, but Cleveland has sort of under wraps been interviewing GM candidates for a while, which is probably not the classiest thing to do. You should probably go about it in a different direction, but that's the way they decided to do it. And from a football standpoint, though, they finally got one right. I mean, this is a long-time personnel executive in this league with tremendous respect, and they'll finally be going in the right direction from a personnel standpoint with John Dorsey. But the way they did it is probably not the classiest way in the world.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about now. Jimmy Haslam has come out and said that Paul DePodesta, who was a baseball guy, he will remain the Browns' chief strategy officer. You got Dorsey, who basically was launched off the side of the road in Kansas City. I mean, that was a kind of
I think that was another. I reported that at the time, and everyone said, because when Andy first took the job in Kansas City, everyone reported that he's only going to coach. He's not interested in personnel. But I was hearing from people again and again that Andy was in charge, essentially, and ultimately forced John Dorsey out. I think that's becoming clearer and clearer. That's what happened now around the league, and Tom Pelissero's one to report Andy was in charge now, revisionist, because he was in charge of the roster, and there was some clashing of heads there. Now, I always say that kind of stuff is a little bit overblown, because we talk about it a lot in Philadelphia as well, because somebody's got to be in charge, and somebody's got to be able to make the final decision. But whether it's the head coach or the personnel guy, ultimately you have to lean on each other and work together. Nobody is capable of doing the job by themselves. So if you look at a Bill Belichick or a Pete Carroll or an Andy Reid, they rely on their personnel people to do the heavy lifting and the legwork when it comes to scouting college players. They obviously can't do it. So it becomes more of an issue of trust, and to do the people work well together, trust each other. And that is the bigger issue than who's got the final say, because really it doesn't, these disagreements don't pop up all that often.
Hey, John, this Dorsey guy isn't wasting any time. He's essentially fired Kenny Britt already, if the reports are true.
Yeah. Well, obviously that signing didn't work out for the Browns. Interesting, the Eagles were reported to have some interest in him early on. So it's probably a good that they went in a different direction, and he went out to Cleveland. But it obviously didn't work out. Josh Gordon is back. Who knows for how long? But they don't necessarily need him. And there's going to be a lot of changes in Cleveland. So this is just the first of many.
John McMullen's with us here. So, Dorsey gives them some credibility there, and obviously gets them moving on to the next phase of their existence in 2018. Now they'll start working towards that, and the Giants need a new GM. That's always the fun game. We did it yesterday with the coaches, but I guess the next question would be, do you think a lot of GMs are in trouble this season? A lot of times the coach and GM are tied together, but sometimes, like in Cleveland now, the coach is going to be in place. The GM's not going to get to make that decision, it sounds like. But sometimes they go hand in hand, and others they don't. Do you think there'll be a lot where just the GM gets let go?
Well, it can happen. I mean, you saw what happened in Carolina. That was probably the strangest one when they let go of Dave Gettleman, and obviously kept Ron Rivera. And it was interesting because Dave came in there and Ron was the coach, and really he never got to hire a head coach on his own because he kind of took the slow route and decided to see if he could work with Ron Rivera, and it turned out that he could. I think in Dorsey's case, I said it. I kind of said it yesterday on the show. I don't think he has a problem with Hugh Jackson. So I think it was one of those things where, not that he's going to be the head coach, and if you want this job, you're going to have to work with him. I think it's the opposite. I think they're going to hire him, and they got the approval from him to keep Hugh Jackson because he likes and respects him. So I think that went a little bit differently. And interesting I bring up Gettleman because I think he's going to be the next Giants general manager. But we'll see how that shakes out as well. But, yeah, I mean, you look at generally teams that are not doing well, and there's a chance the coach and the GM both go, or there's a chance one or the other goes. And it kind of depends on the personnel and who's in a better position. I think the most interesting one is Chicago because everyone probably rightfully assumes John Fox is gone. Ryan Pace hasn't been there too long, but there's always a possibility that the Bears can wake up and say, this guy's done a really, really poor job, and it can go the opposite direction.
Let's look a little deeper at the Eagles and the Rams here, John. And obviously, this is a big one after that Saints loss last night for the Rams. It makes the game a little bit bigger for the Rams now because now they've had a little separation between them and the Saints because they beat them head-to-head. But also the Eagles, Vikings this weekend have a tough one. So this game really has a lot going on for here. You wrote yesterday about Aaron Donald at the website 973ESPN.com. So how do you think he will affect what the Eagles do really well?
Well, I think, as I kind of wrote, he's one of those guys that can wreck a game, so you got to pay attention to him, and you got a game plan around him. There aren't a lot of players in this league, believe it or not, that coaches specifically game plan for, and they got to understand everything starts with that particular player, and he's one of those guys. And the Eagles are smart enough to know that they're not going to get much accomplished unless they block Aaron Donald. And obviously it starts with a double team. Unfortunately, you hit the Rams on sort of the time where Stefan Wisniewski has been pretty solid since replacing Isaac Seumalo. All of a sudden has started kind of a downturn over the past couple games against Chicago, which people didn't notice because it wasn't a close game. And obviously in Seattle, where he had a lot of difficulties with Sheldon Richardson. And if anything, Aaron Donald's more explosive and even a better player than that. So it's going to be difficult.
Now, is this a team overall, because when they were under Fisher, they were still a pretty good defensive team. Now Wade Phillips, a really good coordinator. But is this the same?
I mean, he's so good that people are being named after him. Babies are getting named after him now.
That story's pretty. But are they so? I mean, I feel like people, like even when they were bad, you would say they're bad, but they got a good defense, same level defense.
Yeah, I mean they do have a good defense. They're banged up, but we kind of said that with Chicago. I mean, especially at linebacker, Alec Ogletree and Mark Barron are both listed as questionable. I think that's really important. But those guys are all undersized. Barron used to be a safety, moved up to linebacker. Ogletree is very undersized. So the Rams are very aggressive, as usual. Wade Phillips' fronts are their front seven. But they struggle defending the run at times because they are very light and guys at linebacker, guys who can't take on blocks, and plus those guys are banged up even if they do play. So I think this might be maybe the Jay Ajayi game where you see him break out as a big back who can get moving against a team that struggles against the run. And one of the best ways to slow down a great pass rush, which we just kind of talked with Aaron Donald, is by running the football. So I think it's going to be a big game. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Ajayi, but it could be LeGarrette Blount. But I think the Eagles need to take advantage of some lighter linebackers.
John, how does the linebacker shortage, if you will, or the questionable linebacker situation affect the Eagles' tight ends too? Because now we've seen Zach Ertz out there. We know they like to go to the tight end. Is that a factor?
Well, yeah. I mean, Ogletree is one of the most athletic linebackers in this league. So if you don't have him, and he's dealing with that elbow injury from last week, that's going to make it more difficult, especially in coverage. He's a great coverage linebacker, makes a lot of plays in coverage. So you can't replace a player like that, and he has a knack for it. So that'll be big. But we have to wait for Zach Ertz. I mean, he's at practice today. He was limited yesterday, and from all indications I got, very limited, barely did anything. So I think he's going to be listed as questionable, and we'll see. But I don't think he's a guarantee to play yet.
John McMullen with us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles and Rams on Sunday as we talk a little bit about the matchup. And so a couple linebackers out. Are there anything else that jumps out to you about the Rams? Other than Goff and the running game. I mean, there's so many areas you could focus on. What's the one area that maybe we haven't discussed a lot this week?
Well, I think it is, you just mentioned Wade Phillips. I think if you were doing sort of a Mount Rushmore of great current defensive minds in the NFL, I think it would be, obviously, Bill Belichick would be on there. I think Wade Phillips would be on there. I think Jim Schwartz would be on there, and I'd probably put Mike Zimmer as the fourth. Those are two of the best defensive minds in this game. And ultimately, I mentioned offensively, this might be a Jay Ajayi or a LeGarrette Blount game for the Eagles. I think it's a Jim Schwartz game for the defense more than the players, because we kind of talked earlier in the week about how the Rams run their offense in sort of the college style of looking over at the head coach, who sort of surveys the field for the quarterback, stays in his ear as long as humanly possible. So I think this is a preparation game for Jim Schwartz. And I mentioned one of those other guys, Zimmer. He was able to sort of solve what the Rams did. And I think Schwartz is on that same level. And I think he's going to create a lot of problems for the way the Rams run their offense.
Are there Wade Phillips tendencies that jump out to you, or things that he likes to do that the Eagles can key on?
Yeah, Carson's going to get rushed. I mean, Wade Phillips basically always rushes five, and he likes to play a lot of single high safety. And he's got the guys to get to the quarterback. So I think from that standpoint, you got to look at the left side of the Eagles' offensive line, which started to leak oil. We were all concerned when Jason Peters went down, and then, it wasn't an issue right away. And I think we kind of forgot about it. And all of a sudden, it creeps up, and Vitai's not playing well. I mentioned Wiz is not playing well. And that left side of the offensive line is looking like a weakness. And you can bet you're going to be seeing overload blitzes. That fifth guy rushing is going to come from that side, and Carson's going to have to understand that.
Talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, Eagles and Rams. Lane Johnson, Robert Quinn, that should be a fun one to watch as well, because you talk about Aaron Donald, but Quinn's pretty good as well. Johnson has kind of been a key, and you talk about the left side of the line. If they're going to run the ball, Brandon Brooks, they got Brockers on their D-line. On that side, it's Brockers and Quinn against Johnson and Brooks. That could really be where you see the Eagles' point of attack in the rushing game.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles are a right-handed team. They have been all year. They're going to continue to be, because that side has been lights out basically all year. And I don't expect that to slow at any point. I mean, those guys are good players. Lane has been an all-pro level player. Brooks has been tremendous. Jason Kelsey's been tremendous at center. And it's kind of strength versus strength, as you mentioned, because Brockers is very good, Quinn's very good, but you never kind of worry as far as that side of the Eagles' offensive line, nor should you. As long as those guys are out there, Eagles are going to be fine. It's the other side you gotta keep an eye on.
Alshon Jeffrey is going to be matched up with Tremaine Johnson out there. We'll see if they can get Alshon involved. Is Johnson one of those shutdown guys?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's paid like it because they franchised him
right.
A couple times. But if you look at the true shutdown corners in this league, and there's not a lot of them, Patrick Peterson, Richard Sherman when he's healthy. If you saw Xavier Rhodes against Julio Jones, he's not that kind of guy, but he's a very good corner, very good zone corner, very good ball skills. So if you do make a poor pass, he's the kind of guy who can make a play on the football. But I don't think he's that type of lockdown corner. But the Eagles don't have Julio Jones either. So, Jeffrey's been effective, and we also know the improvement of Aguilar. You generally don't need one of those lockdown corners against the Eagles, and Johnson's very good. He's a very good player.
They do have Sammy Watkins out there. I don't know that he's lived up to the draft stock. The Bills traded a lot up to go get him. He's been traded. He's with the Rams now. I don't know that you just mentioned Julio Jones. He's certainly not on that level. But he'll see probably Ronald Darby. And they like to go vertical a lot with Jared Goff. I mean, he's a guy that he's the 6th highest passer rating with pressure, too. So he'll throw the ball down the field whether you come after him or not. So the Goff-Watkins duo against this Eagles secondary should be a fun one.
Yeah, he's got a ton of talent, and I think in Buffalo he always produced the issues where he wasn't always on the field. He wasn't on the field a lot. It's interesting because the Rams, it's been the opposite. He's been able to get out there, but he hasn't been that effective. Really, Robert Woods has been their best receiver, and that surprises me. It surprises me a lot because, as I said, Watkins has terrific talent. And should be producing more. So, but you see it in every NFL city with quarterbacks. They start to get comfortable with certain targets. You see it with Carson Wentz, who's obviously got great affinity for Zach Ertz and is starting to build that chemistry with Alshon Jeffrey. Wasn't necessarily there early in the season. Now, as we get later in the season, it seems to be getting better and better. Maybe that ultimately happens with Watkins, but to this point, it's been a bit of a disappointment.
Hey, John, how about the Rams and their screen game with Gurley? Because it seems like that's a bread and butter play for them, and everybody saw Michael Kendricks struggle in coverage the other night. He
had a rough night, man.
And then he zigged and they zagged right by him.
And Gurley, he's a beast to bring down. They didn't tackle well against the Seahawks the other night, and he's not a guy that you want to tackle in the open field.
Yeah, you're right, but I think in a lot of ways that's good for Michael because I think Michael struggles with the shifty guys. And, say if Kamara was out there or Christian McCaffrey or a player like that or any of the Patriots, running backs with Burkhead and Lewis and White, those are the guys he kind of struggles with, the good route runners. And you see that McKissick in Seattle. He used to play receiver in college. So those are the kind of guys he struggles with. Really, the downhill runners, and you mentioned Gurley is a beast to bring down. So from that standpoint, it's difficult. But he's not going to be sort of faked out of his shoes like he was last week. Gurley's not that type of guy in the receiving game. So I think in a way it's helpful. Now, Gurley's much more difficult in the running game. I think that's a bigger issue.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com for more on this matchup this weekend. Check it out. Follow him at JF McMullen and read his Extra Points NFL column right now on Roger Goodell at 97.3 ESPN.com. John, give us your pick for Eagles and Rams.
Well, I said they were going to split. I'm keeping with it. I got the Eagles, but it's going to be very close, a field goal game, and Pete's going to love that because two strong-legged kickers and Greg Zuerlein. And
Greg
Jake
the
Elliott.
leg.
Yeah, I got the Eagles winning 24-21.
24-21 Eagles. Don't forget, pick the perfect score tonight. At 5:30, you're playing for 600 beans, PT. 600 beans.
I like when the kickers get involved in the discussion.
He's Johnny Mack, of course, live here and on the Countdown to Kickoff show, starting at 1 o'clock on Sunday at the Rusty Nail in Cape May. Great establishment down there. Great time. And, John, we'll be listening there, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.